Would you just speak some words of hope to them to help them hear once again what our hope is and how I can find hope?
I think the best way that I find that I can share hope is certainly in Jesus, but that idea of how do they see Jesus in me, or how has God helped me, and so the story of one of my most hopeless times when my friend had committed suicide, another friend had been raped. I was in college. I was distraught. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what my future or even tomorrow held. And for me, somebody who had always been so driven, someone who always knew all the answers, or I thought I did, I really got lost in those couple years there after my friend committed suicide. I think it wasn't just the friend's suicide that did it, but that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, that really got me asking those big questions, and I didn't have answers to, and so it took me kind of in a spiral. But the thing that really ultimately got me out of that, I did have some people in my life that, thankfully, that kept me, I think, from going off the edge. But the thing that helped the most is I still remember I went camping. I was supposed to go with two other guys, but these were my friends, but again, we kind of lost connection through college years, and it was a spring break. I was trying to reconnect, and whatever happened last minute, they both had to cancel out. So I went camping all by myself. I said, forget them. I'm just going to go camping. I just need to get out of Dodge, and so I went, and I didn't know what to expect. I was just up there, kind of in a depression, I think, really, and in a and I knew that nature often helped me, getting away and sensing nature and the birds and the animals and the sunsets and sunrises, that sometimes helped me. So I was there, and it started off bad. There was a rainstorm. I locked my keys in my car, and I thought, what the heck am I doing? I was way out of nowhere, out in the mountains of western Maryland, and if I had gotten stuck, it was going to be a long walk. But anyhow, I got my keys, finally relaxed that evening, and the rain let up. I got my tent up, and in that moment, as the sun was setting, and I had made a little fire trying to dry out, God really showed up in a very real way right there in the campsite.
Were you asking for him to show up?
No, I was. I don't. Maybe I was in some way. I think I was just despairing, and I think I had said earlier, maybe it was in the other take, that sometimes when you get to the bottom of hopelessness, when you don't know where else to turn, sometimes it opens the doors to look for new things that you hadn't looked for before.
Right. Blessed are the spiritually poor.
Yes.
When we get poor, God has an opportunity to come and make us rich with Him.
Amen. I think all the other distractions and things that I was using to fill my hope that had then crashed.
Yeah.
I had a faith, but it wasn't real. It wasn't a great foundation. I mean, it was just based on some hearsay, maybe not my own experiences, and maybe even in a limited way in my own family.
So you're despairing around the campfire, but it wasn't, you weren't having a religious service, and you weren't doing all your pastoral stuff. You weren't even a pastor at that point. But were you crying out to God? I mean, were you saying, God, help me?
I think I had been asking, and probably in some way asking in that moment, God, are you real?
Yeah.
Do you love me? If you're real, do you even care about me?
Wow.
What about my friend Dave? He needed help, and I didn't know, and I was feeling guilty, and I think that was adding to my sense of depression, and just feeling guilty that I hadn't known that my friend was about to kill himself and did, and that I hadn't maybe helped my friend, the girl who was raped, and then so I was feeling guilty. I didn't know whether God existed or what. My parents had told me He was real. My grandparent, I had grown up in the church, but nothing was real at that moment. Everything was questioning.
The foundation's sort of crumbling. You got the pieces of the foundation laying there, but they're not built into a solid house in any way. And you're at the campfire, sun setting.
And all of a sudden, there's a presence in the campsite, and there's no. This is early April, spring break. Nobody else is up there.
You hadn't been drinking yet.
I hadn't been drinking. I thought about it, but I hadn't been drinking, and or anything else. So something, and I thought it was a person. And so I thought, great, I'm going to go up here and get robbed or attacked.
Right.
It wasn't a person, and I thought it was a bear. I didn't hear anything, so I thought it's too stealthy to be a person. Maybe there's a huge bear. And then all of a sudden, I just knew it was God. And these words came to my mind, to my heart. David, I am real. I still remember that. And David, I love you.
Wow.
I still feel
I can see it.
that in my life and the power of how it affected me in that moment. And David, I love your friend David, and he's in my hands.
Wow.
And David, I've got a plan for your life.
Wow.
And so all of that, and it probably just took a couple seconds, but and he just said, trust me, follow me, and I was experiencing, in that moment, I was experiencing heaven. That was the kingdom come to earth.
Well, you were having your own Jeremiah 29:11. If you listen to what you're saying, it's God saying to you, not in general to the people of God, but David, I love you, I know you, I hear you, I see you, and I've got a purpose for you. I have a plan for you. It didn't unrape your friend. It didn't bring your other friend back to life, but it began to take the pieces of pain and tragedy, and I don't want to put, man, I especially don't want to take away from the power of what's going on right now with your heart, but it began to make it seem like, if I'm hearing you right, that it wasn't all purposeless or meaningless, but that God was present and that he was in charge, and he was in charge of you. How did that end?
Just to go back to what you were saying, I think, sometimes we want all the bad stuff to be undone.
Right.
That's the hope and the promise for the end. Finally, when God comes again in Jesus Christ, somehow, he's gonna, make anew and unravel the hurts and the sins that have happened and somehow recreate. And he even begins to do that now. But he was showing me that in the midst of the brokenness of my life and of the world, he was still present and still had a plan and a purpose, and was going to use that pain, was going to use that hurt in some ways that at that moment I didn't fully understand. And all through this, I knew, it was not just some generic God. It really was the God of that was in Jesus. It was this God who knew the brokenness, who knew my pain, who had suffered himself and died on the cross, and had come into the brokenness of the world himself because he cared, that could then even speak to me in that way. A God that was up on his high chair or throne and didn't care, hadn't come down in my mess, that wouldn't have resonated. But a God that cared enough that he, was in the brokenness of our world, and had even come down and spoken to me even when I had almost written him off. When I was broken, it dared come down and just speak to me, just me. There was billions of people on the earth, and why would God show up? But he came down and took time to be present to me in a way that gave me hope.
It's interesting. If your two friends had come like you were planning, you may not have had that experience. And so it's interesting to even think through that God got you even more alone so that he could be with you himself. And so, because you could have given up on going, but you didn't, and you went, and you, without being able to control it, God showed up and spoke to you nearly audibly. It doesn't sound like it was audibly, but nearly. You knew clearly that God. So how did you end that evening? Was it from that moment, around that campfire, did you just like a smile come on your face and you went to bed with a sense of peace, or what happened?
I think about it now. If it had, this was before cell phones and and tweets, and I think if I had cell phone, I'd have been tweeting all over the place, or
so you were celebrating. Facebook. You went.
Oh my gosh, I was so energized.
Wow.
just as quickly as the voice and the presence came, it left. And right about that point, the sun finished setting at the down through the horizon. I mean, the sun had been beaming through the trees. It was almost setting. So think about how fast the sun sets.
Right.
And in that short, minute of a time, God was there, and then boom, he was gone. Then the sun set, and it was dark. It was getting dark. And so, but I was so energized and filled. I feel like the Holy Spirit. I mean, I could have had a whole sermon right there.
Right.
But I didn't have cell phone. To share it. I had nowhere to share it, so I couldn't call anybody.
Right.
And I thought, do I leave now? Do I just get up and leave in the middle of the at night here and go home? And it was a little dangerous probably to go where I had been in the dark. So that was part of it. And part of it was I didn't know what else God was going to do. So I thought, well, let me just stay here. Maybe something else is going to happen.
That is so amazing.
And so the next day, nothing else happened, but I continued to feel excited. And then the next day, I did some hiking and just kept talking to the Lord about trying to unpack all that had happened. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I've just got to go home and tell some people. So I did go home, and I shared with my parents. I shared with my brother. I shared with some friends, and one of the closest people, my grandfather was a pastor and probably one of the biggest mentors in my life, and I went and shared with him.
Wow.
And he, that was kind of the Isaiah moment, not the Isaiah moment, the Samuel moment.
Oh yeah.
I kind of heard and went back to Eli the priest, and so my granddad was kind of like that, and he was like, well, you need to.
I think you've heard from God.
I think you've heard from God,
wow.
And you need to, this doesn't happen to everybody, but God is present for all of us. But you did hear him in a special way, and he's got a plan for your life. I can see it.
So in. It doesn't matter exactly what time it was, but in the matter of a moment, in what was a very special moment, your hopelessness dissipated and you became hopeful. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say, is that you were far from God, unanswered questions, doubting all sorts of things, dealing with guilt, dealing with depression, dealing with the loss. And in that moment, God shows up and says to you, in a moment that you couldn't have orchestrated, you weren't planning, you were just going through the motions and hitting rock bottom, God shows up and says to you very clearly, David, I'm here, I'm real, I love you. I loved your friend David. He's with me, he's safe in my arms. However God communicated that to you. And in that brief moment, he didn't say, now I want you to go here and do this and do that. He just made himself known to you, and in making himself known to you in a real tangible way, you had a new and a renewed hope.
Yeah. And
I think, so as I think about what we can say to folks who are listening to us is that I maybe summarize this in this way. First of all, if you're in despair, that may be a good thing, because it may be that you're emptying out and that God's allowing, as David experienced, an emptying out of everything you've been counting on that can't provide hope. They did for a while, but they're not permanent hope providers. They don't have the ability to weather every storm. And so when you get like David, and we've all felt this at some point, in fact I think it's a healthy thing to get to the place, even the disciples, if you remember, at one point Jesus said, hey, a lot of people have left me, are you going to leave me too? And they said, where else would we go? When you get to that place of, I don't have anywhere else to go, everything and everyone I've counted on are gone, that's where God has a lot of room to speak. So if you're that hopeless today, if you're feeling that kind of despair, I think we would encourage you, just be honest with it, sit in it. That's what David was doing. I mean, he was, that's what it sounds like to me anyway, wanting to solve it, not wanting, it's an uncomfortable place to be in hopelessness, but in the midst of not, and we don't have time to explore this, but you said I didn't go over the edge, but you were close. You were in that, what am I going to do from here? So I would say this, sit with the despair, just allow that despair. If it's real, I don't want to make you despair, but sit with what despair you have. Sit with the hopelessness that you have. Don't medicate it. We have a tendency to medicate our hopelessness by ignoring it, doing entertainment, having a drink, working harder. maybe the time for you right now is exactly what David experienced, just to sit with it. Whether you go off into the woods or you just sit at home on your porch or whatever you do, expect or at least ask God to show up. Maybe it's a desperation prayer of, God, if you're real, please show yourself to me. God, if you're real, I need to hear from you. God, I want more than anything else to have a moment with you. I think that the church is the place that, and by church I don't mean an institution. David and I have been around the institution of the church enough to know that, man, that and a quarter won't even buy you a cup of coffee. But the church, the real church, people who love God, who love the Lord, who have been saved by the power of the gospel, who are living in fellowship with one another, that's the church. And though that's where God so often shows up. Sometimes it's out alone, but why not come and hear this series of messages? If you can't plug in with us in person, watch the sermons on Ustream or listen to them on the podcast to get a sense of what God may, because I think God will be speaking to you. Our hope is in the God who created the heavens and the earth. Our hope is in his promise of love and faithfulness to us, that he is a good God who loves us, who's providing for us. And he has not promised, this is a clarity for us, he has not promised an easy path. In fact, Jesus said, in this life you'll have trials and tribulations. And we keep thinking, well, it's too much. Nobody wants to sit in pain more than 2 seconds. But sometimes, David, it sounds like you've been sitting with this pain for a while. It was one tragedy after another. It was one, oh my gosh, and then oh my gosh, and then oh my gosh. So just allow God the room to work in your life. Know that he is real and that his promise of goodness towards you is very tangible, very real. And you may be just at the moment, as David was when he started. Even the camping trip, I just love what you said. Your friends canceled on you. You almost locked your keys in the car or whatever. It rained on you. I mean, so it's one thing after another. It's easy to sit here in 5 minutes and talk about it, but he was experiencing it in real time, and he didn't know the answer. He didn't know how God was going to meet him in that moment in that campfire. You don't know that you're not one moment away from a powerful meeting with God. And so hang in and hang on and allow God the time to really perhaps get you to the place where your foundations are in crumbles, because that's where I think you're going to find that the foundation that can never fail you is the promise of a God who's real and who loves you. And so I know I'm so grateful for David taking the time to sit and talk with us together. I'm grateful that you're taking a few moments to listen to this. We've got some more. And let me just apologize to you. I have been so irregular. I've started this and then I haven't recorded anything, and then we haven't had this chance to be together. I'm making this commitment to you, and I've got some staff people that are helping me with this, that we're going to do this more regularly. And so you're going to have more and more, not only will you see more and more of folks like David, we've got some other interviews coming up with some folks around some other things happening. We are, the main thing that we want to do at Life Matters is to remind you of two amazing things. And that is that your life matters. I don't care who you are, how broken you are, how desperate you feel. Your life matters. You're not an accident, and you were created with a purpose and loved by a God and known by him. You matter. You may feel insignificant and invisible, but you're not. You matter to God. And we also want to talk about the things that do matter in life. What really matters. And we don't want to talk about it. I hope you haven't experienced us today talking about these things in sort of churchy ways, but just in real life ways. And so thank you for giving us some time. Thanks so much for being a part of this. If you don't have a church home, come and visit us. If you're already a part of Oakdale Church, hey, we love you, and it's a joy for us to be able to get to be pastors of this church together and bless you. So we got it right that time. I think it recorded.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. David, thanks for the time. God bless.
Glad to be here.
All right, we'll see you guys soon.